Hello and welcome to today's video. This time it's another archive special. So back in, I believe it was 1999, Channel 4 were running a series called Collector's Lot, where they took like three collectors of different sorts of things and featured their collections on like a daytime show. I think it was on like 4 or 5 times a week, and it ran for 5 years amazingly. Now, I used to have a shop, as you know, back in the 90s called Purple Haze, and we used to have lots of different sorts of collectors come in, and well, eventually I got picked myself, and that's what we'll be having a look at today. So sit back, relax, and let's take a look. Okay then, so I'm trying to think back to 1999, and back then the shop was in full flow, Purple Haze, and we were super busy, and the company that made Collector's Lot, which is called 2-4 Productions, were based on the outskirts of Plymouth, and because we were, we would have a lot of collectors come into Purple Haze, the researchers would often come in and say, "Oh, Jules, have you got, someone who you could point our way who might be good on Collector's Lot?" And I was able to get them a few collectors over the years, given the names of people who subsequently went on the show. A friend of mine who went on and did The Simpsons on it. There was another chap, I gave them the details, and he went on and did the Aliens movies. But they were always on, "Well, what about you, Jules?" And I said, "Well, I'm happy to do it. I don't mind doing it. But what?" Because we could do it on the Star Wars toys, vintage Star Wars, which I think they'd actually already covered, vintage paperbacks, or at the time I was collecting retro games, which was, becoming a bit of a thing back in the 90s. So old video games, and they said, "Yeah, that's the one we'll do it on." And they just sort of called it old computers rather than like retro games. I don't even think that was much of a term back then. And there we were. I said, "Yeah, okay, we'll do it." So back then I had quite a collection of old video games. I used to collect all the vintage systems, all of them. So the early Atari systems, all the old home computers as well. And I was particularly at that time into the Nintendo Game & Watch handhelds, of which there was 59. And I had a full set come the end before I eventually got rid of them. But back then I was in the middle of putting a collection together. So I was quite keen on those, I remember, at the time. And the presenter was someone called Debbie Thrower, and I think she did it for at least 2 years. And I remember going down, sort of borrowed a van, filled it up with a selection of stuff. And when I got there, it was in quite a nice like country house, and they were filming. They were there all week, so there were all the collectors in for that week, including the person who owned the house, who had a big collection of Cornish ware. They were all descending on the house on different days, so I just turned up. I was second in the slot, but I was the only one, I think, being filmed that day. The other two people in my program were like on location, and they had some monitors all laid up for me, and I think one was I had my Vectrex on the end, and one was playing a PlayStation, one was playing the Spectrum, ZX Spectrum, another one was playing one of the Atari computers as well. They get me to play a bit of Pac-Man as well, which is brilliant. So I mean, quite an experience really. And what you're about to see is actually the second take, because we did the first take and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. It was a really good run through, but sadly, I don't know what was wrong. There was something wrong, or it was just like a rehearsal in effect. And they went with the second one, which is sort of, it wasn't so spontaneous. I don't think it was such a good version of it, but there you go. At least they spelt my name right, which was the main thing. I remember them saying, "Oh, they were putting in the lower third," and they said, "Oh, is that the right spelling of your name?" And I said, yeah, that's it. So it was a good, fun experience. And they said, "Do you want to put your details on?" If you remember, there was something called CFAX for BBC. I think it was called Oracle or Teletext for ITV, and they put my details on teletext, so if people had old video games, they could get in contact with me through there. And I was able, consequently through that, over the next few months, to get a few Game & Watches for my collection. Apparently 2-4 Productions are still going now, but my particular episode isn't online anywhere. There's a lot of full episodes on YouTube, but not this one, and I'm only going to put my little segment on there. I'm not going to upload the whole video, at least not yet. Apparently it was getting 2 million views a day, which was pretty good for a daytime antique show, as it were. But anyway, it's a bit of fun. It's definitely something from the archive. We are talking, as we speak today, 24 years ago. So once again, I am a tiny bit thinner, and I've got slightly less greying hair, but I think it's a bit of a historical curiosity, and I think you'll enjoy taking a look. So let's have a look right now.
Hello and welcome to another collector's lot coming from Cornwall. Our home for the week, this imposing Cornish manor house, built on a site dating back to the Domesday Book. The present Belgian owners, Pinky and Michelle, bought the house 5 years ago and have been putting their individual stamp on it ever since. Coming up, I'll be discovering that the game isn't over for old computer systems, going west with a youthful collector of dogs, and learning about the history of the suffragette movement. My next guest grew up at the start of the computer craze in the early 1980s. Instead of playing cops and robbers in the playground, he and his mates were busy perfecting their skills on these Game & Watch handsets. So of all these that you've now collected, what were the kinds that you were playing with as a boy?
It was any of these double screen Game & Watches, all the single screen ones down there. They're all good fun.
And what kind of games were you playing on?
Well, I had like this one, which is Donkey Kong. This was one of the most popular ones. You control Mario, and you have to free his girlfriend from the top of the level here.
These must have been quite expensive toys at the time.
Yeah, they were. The doubles here were £25 to £30 each, which was quite a lot. So it's just like a birthday or Christmas present, really. But people did tend to swap them as well. So you get bored with the game, you swap it for another one.
What about the old personal computers? How were games played on these then?
Well, on like the Spectrum here, you actually had a tape deck, and you bought your game with a cassette, and you had to put it into the computer and load it in, which took about 5 minutes. And eventually your game would come up, or you could actually type your own games in if you were any good. But they were very, very basic, but good fun all the same.
How much are they worth now compared with the kind of retail prices at the time?
Well, this one, for example, the Atari was probably a couple of £100 when it first came out, but you could pick one up for about £25 now, or less, you know, at a boot sale even.
How durable are they, given that they must have been given quite a lot of punishment in the 70s and 80s?
Well, they're pretty good. It's with the console systems, I've yet to find one which doesn't work, but the computers, they do tend to break down from time to time. They can be repaired, but it's just easier to get another system.
So what about that one on the end, say? Is that still available?
It's not available anymore. It's quite a nice little system, quite desirable nowadays, but you can't buy them anymore, I'm afraid. But they do still turn up from time to time.
What about the quality of the game, something like Pac-Man?
Well, the Pac-Man here is very, very basic by today's standards, but was a bestseller in its time, sold 2 million units, which was massive, really. Good fun, even now.
Do you still play with them then?
Well, very occasionally. I wouldn't say I play them all the time. I prefer the modern systems like the PlayStation or the Nintendo. If
someone forks out for something like this, perhaps for nostalgia reasons or whatever, do they tend to want the magazines that go with them?
They do. The magazines are important to know which games to buy for the system. If you're going to be buying an old game, you want it to be a good game. So the magazines of the time told you what was what. So the magazines are in demand now, yeah.
Which, in your view, were the really good games, the one that stood the test of time?
Well, Pac-Man is a classic, and Donkey Kong over there is another very good one. Plus, for the Spectrum here, you've got Manic Miner or Jet Set Willy. Any of the Ultimate games are very good.
Bringing us more up to date, what's something like this?
That's the Virtual Boy. It was only released in Japan and America. Pretty much state-of-the-art in 1996. Good fun, but sadly didn't take off, so that's a good investment for the future, that one.
So when did you realise that this was such a strong area for collecting?
Well, 2 or 3 years ago, I thought, yeah, I'd like to get a bit nostalgic on my old games and try and pick them up again. Plus, there was a lot of internet sites devoted to like the Atari and the Spectrum and the Game & Watches. I thought, yeah, there's people out there looking for this stuff, and I think I can pick it up myself. So I just started collecting it.
For someone who was really into computers, what of all that you've got here would they envy you most?
Well, the boxed Game & Watches are particularly desirable. There's a lot of people looking for boxed ones.
What sort of prices are we talking about?
Well, something like Donkey Kong, which is more common, would be like £30. Those two there, which are quite rare, boxed Game & Watches, they'd be up to 100. And you'd sell them quite easily at that price, yeah.
Are you now buying brand new games, keeping them in their boxes as an investment for the future?
I am, yeah. I think it's worth doing that. When you buy a new game, look after the box, because you never know.
Good advice. Thanks very much indeed for coming on the programme.
So there you go. Hope you enjoyed that little blast from the past, another archive special. Now, we've got a couple more archive specials to go. We've got a Doctor Who signing with Sophie Aldred to come, and also an overview of the Purple Haze shop in its history, really. I'm going to have my business partner George, and we ran the shop together for many years, and the best part of a decade, and we're still really good friends. And I've been filming a little bit of George's collection recently, his Doctor Who collection, for example, and we're going to sort of sit side by side and have a look through the old Purple Haze photos and really reminisce about that, because it's well, over 25 years ago now. Anyway, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed that little blast from the past. If you have, do please give the video a thumbs up. Do please hit the subscribe button if you've not already for regular vintage retro content, and I'll look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye.